So, good evening. Last week, the quick start for the second edition of Star Trek Adventures has dropped from Modiphius. It's available on their website for free. Go and download it. And I had a chance a little bit over the last few days to actually look at it. I made a little video as well on my German channel with another chap I'm playing with, Star Trek's Adventures on German. I have also run the game there. And yeah, together we had a look at what's actually different, and some of those differences we quite like, and some of them I'm not so sure about yet. But yeah, I wanted to basically go on record here as well, just to explain what the differences are as far as I can tell them. Now, I've run a few 2D20 games before. You might know from my channel that I'm running Conan Adventures, or I have run Conan, the Shadow of the Sorcerer campaign. We finished the whole thing. Everything on YouTube if you want to look at it. I'm also... I've just recently run some Dreams and Machines, so I've got some 2D20 experience from there. Looking at my bookcases here, I've got Dune here as well, and I've got Fallout here as well, and played some Fallout. So I'm not new to 2D20, let's put it that way. So, but this quite excites me, because Star Trek, let's say Star Trek Adventures, the original book, I found really difficult to navigate and get my head around it. And even though I've run it a couple of times, I'm sure I didn't use all the rules right. But yeah. So, why are Modiphius doing this thing over there? Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition. They announced it right at the end of February, and now the quick start came out. And as far as I understand it, they are still aiming to get the finished product out by Gen Con, which I think is at the beginning of August. So, it's not far away. Which also means that whatever we see in this quick start is likely to be a fair reflection without huge changes likely to happen between those. But there will be some, I'm sure. So, first I thought we might have a look, and this is all very white, hopefully that's not a problem for you, at the website of what they say the first look was on Modiphius itself. It gives us a little bit of an overview here. So, they wanted to do this. Dedicated fan service, clean up and refine the presentation. Absolutely. Yeah, they definitely need to do that. No question asked. And refine how they've done it with the other 2D20 systems since. Lessons learned, implemented, yeah, great. So this is the first thing where I said, all right, that's interesting. Expanded guidance on use of traits mechanic. Now, traits were in the system before, but they have a much bigger focus now. They have a much bigger role to play, and they're explaining much more about how to actually use this best. So that's different. I'm just noticing my YouTube chat is not coming through. So if you want to leave me a chat message, if I can't read it here, go on Twitch. So next thing, traits, we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. No challenge dice. So my beloved D6s with all those stars and little UFP, Federation symbols on them, basically, they can be retired. Let's put it that way. A wealth of character options. So we've got a few new species here that were actually spread around different books before. So it's now 14 species in the core book. Cardassians, Ferengi, Klingons, Orions, Romulans. Good. And life path options. I have to say I really enjoy the life path options. So having them here, maybe a bit tidied up as well from the excellent character generator you can get online. It's probably a good thing. We've got talents. Every character species has a distinct ability separate from the talent options. So basically, you now get 4 talents and the species talent ability, whatever you want to call it. So you now have 5 instead of 4. They updated the advancement rules, so there's a bit more like in the Klingon core rulebook, which was actually a step up already from the old one for the organization and how well the rules were presented. And starship mechanics have changed a little bit. They wanted to simplify that as well and get everybody involved in fighting. There's not a lot on the quick start about ships, but we'll have a look of what's there as well. So, by the way, while I'm streaming this, if you have any questions, please put them in the comment. If you see this later on YouTube, for instance, or on video on demand, hop on YouTube, leave me a comment there, leave me a like, of course. Yeah, you know what it's like. That's what we do this sort of thing for streamers. So, I'm going to flick over now to this beautiful book here. I really like this book cover, and it's different to the core rule book, but it's got the same color scheme, same sort of characters in it, same uniforms, and it's a real mix. Now, I'm not a huge scholar of Star Trek uniforms, but even I can tell that this is a real mix of different eras, and it harks back a little bit, or it shows some resemblance here, for example, to Strange New Worlds, which is probably the series I enjoyed most recently. There's a little bit of different scenes here. We've got Cardassians, we've got Vulcans on there, we've got, I think it's a joint trill from the character sheets. We've got an Andorian with a mohawk, excellent. We've got a human, we've got a Tellarite, if I'm right. Yeah, so a really good mix. But it's also this sense of wonder. So they're in this cave. I don't actually intend to talk about the adventure at all. I just flicked through it. So whatever I said would be half-baked anyway. And I don't want to spoil it. But just having this focus on exploration here. Yes, she's got her phaser out, but they're all looking at tricorders. They're looking at what's going on. They've got the sparkles around. They've got the color scheme. I like that. I think it's a good way of demonstrating what Star Trek should be about. So, one of the first things you see is this color scheme. So it's not black page with white or green or blue or whatever printing. It's the other way around. Probably printing cost, but actually my eyes are getting a bit older. As I am getting a bit older, so I find it on paper certainly better to read. I do hope that they have a screen-friendly, if you like, a dark mode version of the PDF, because not every PDF you can just switch the colors around. So, clean. Yeah, the look is very clean, I think. Of course, it's a quick start, so it's not as tightly packed. It didn't have to print this. But they might print it. 48 pages is a typical divided by 4 sort of print thing. So, explaining this. We don't need to explain it, do we? What's a role-playing game? Well, if you don't know yet, read it. Get the PDF down. I'm not going to preach this because people who watch my channel typically know this. The core mechanic in these 2D20 systems is similar but not identical. Basically, you have attributes, and they used to be called disciplines. So you might have something like fitness and security, and you add them together, and that gives you your target number, and then you roll a d20, you need to stay under. Typically, you roll 2d20, that's where the name comes from, and you have to stay under. Some other games do this slightly differently, but that hasn't changed. What has changed is we have the same attributes, but we don't have disciplines anymore. So they're a very undisciplined bunch, probably just so that we can talk about lower decks. No, and seriously, they're now called departments. And ships, they were called departments before, so I think they just simplified that slightly. We still have focuses, which basically means these are things where you're very, very good at. If the focus is relevant, you know all this stuff. You basically get a bonus. Yeah, if you roll under your focus, it counts as 2 successes. I think that hasn't changed. So, most of this is the same, but traits, this is where we actually zoom in a little bit. Traits are now front and center. Is that the right word to say? Probably. They're now basically saying, okay, traits can be anything. That has been consistent on 2D20. Actually, can I just say, one thing I find quite annoying with Modiphius stuff is they overwrite stuff, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a professional editor or anything, but I edit a lot of writing from a lot of people, and I write myself quite a bit. And they tend to invent words in Modiphius. Yeah, I mean, this is a lot easier than it used to be, but if you look at Conan, for example, yeah, right. So there's stress. Yeah, you can suffer stress, but if it's mental stress, it's called one thing, resolve. If it's physical one, then it's called something else, vigor. But if you have 5 of them, then it's going to be called a harm. There are 2 types of harm. There's a trauma and there's an injury. Oh, come on. Yeah, why make it so difficult? Why? Why invent 3 terms if one will do? Anyway, traits very much feel like this game here. Games and Machines. Very much like truths in that game. Again, why don't they just call them traits in Dreams and Machine? Anyway, I'm not the editor, and that's probably for the better, because otherwise that wouldn't be as good as it is. But yeah, traits can be basically anything. Something that is true, as it says. Right, so it could be something like smoke. Right, so it's a trait of a location. You could have smoke. That could then impact your skill rolls. You could make it harder. You could say, okay, that actually means you have to have 3 successes rather than 2. That's how I read this. But you can also influence these traits more. So they're talking a lot more about how you can change traits to get things online. And for that, we will have a look as well on momentum spins. I think that's how that's going to do. Or you could do tasks to maybe change a trait of a location. A lot of this is not fully explained because it is only quick start and is not final at that either. Artwork I quite like. Yeah, I like their style. Oh yeah, and potent traits. Basically, it's just traits, but with a higher level. So you could have Smoky Room 2, so I think what they say, thick smoke, and that means you have to make 2 effort to lower the trait to get rid of the smoke so it doesn't impact you anymore. Yeah, that's basically how that works. Tasks haven't changed massively at all. I like this little thing here that they've got. Don't roll for everything. It's common GM knowledge, really. A lot of games have something like this, but I like the way they really succinctly sum this up. Yeah, if your character can do this, because they have enough time or expertise, and these are all very, very good, well-trained people in Starfleet, then don't roll. Yeah, just say, yeah, you do it. If they cannot do it, absolutely, then don't let them roll, because otherwise you just have to fudge it as a GM. Only if there's a chance that whatever they want to do gets accomplished, then let them roll, because that's where the interest is, right? Yeah, no empty rolling. Yeah, looking at you, D&D. Right. Attempting a task, as it says, is the same. They have a little bit about a re-roll, saying you have to have a good reason to re-roll, but that's not that difficult, or different, I should say. They kept difficulty 0 tasks. So these are tasks basically where you say, they're really easy. And doesn't that contradict what we just read? Yes and no. There's this mechanic of momentum, if you know the game. Basically, if you have a difficulty 0 task, you roll, you can decide to roll for it. You can just say automatically succeed, or if you roll for it, you might roll what they call a complication, so yeah, a 20, and then you have to accept that. But you might also roll more successes than 0. You're quite competent, so good chance, and gain momentum. So it sort of contradicts it, but there's a mechanical reason for that. So what's next? They started using many more of these charts. Now I could reach right the way up there, but I won't try. Actually, I will. Hang on. So you can see my t-shirt, like red shirt. So something I liked in this one here, Captain's Log, is that they used a lot of charts and diagrams just to make it clearer, and you can actually use them as visual anchors to navigate the parts of the book. So you say, right, I remember that was next to this diagram. Works quite nicely. So that's basically how a task works. Once you know that, you don't need that anymore. But at a con, for example, with new players, might be useful to have that at hand. So let's go where it's slightly more exciting here. That's not new. Teamwork and assistance. That's a small change, but it is a change worth mentioning. In the past, basically, if there was a good reason that you could have several people assist you, each person assisting you rolls a D20, and if they're successful, they basically add that success to you. But you, as the task leader, have to be successful for it to count. Works quite nicely, but there was a certain element, certainly in some scenarios we played, where everybody says, I'm going to help as well, and I'm going to help as well, and can the ship help? So you ended up generating a lot of momentum. So here, what it now says is, if you have more than one person who wants to help you, you have to spend 1 momentum extra for everybody else to help you. Yeah? So, and then you roll against it. Is that right? Is that the first one costs 1 or the second one costs 1? Each assistant after the first either costs 1 momentum or adds 1 threat. GM's momentum. So that's right. There's no escalating cost as for buying extra D20s, which you can still do. Yeah. So complications gets a little bit of an extended explanation. I don't think it has changed. But let's have a look. So momentum, as I explained, this is a shortened list. That hasn't really changed, other than this has become a bit clearer, this create a trait. So you can change something by spending some momentum about the trait, like the smoke earlier. Yeah, you can say, it's really smoky, but I've got this momentum sitting here. I'm going to do a task, and then with this task, I can then change after that task that relates to the trait. I can then spend the momentum to get rid of the smoke. Yeah? So it does say it must be something that would result from your actions. You can't just say, It's a smoky room. I'm having a cup of tea, and I want to spend the momentum that the tea clears the smoke. I don't think even Earl Grey can do that. So, yeah, that's just highlighting the importance of traits again. Yeah, threat hasn't really changed very much. To keep the initiative and so on hasn't really changed much at all. So I'm going to skip over this a little bit. The threat spends, again, it's a shortened list. I'm sure that the full rule books will have a lot more in it. Yeah. And by the way, if I'm saying anything that you know to be wrong, just tell me in the chats. Yeah. I'm here to learn as well as to explain. Determination, you can spend that as well. What I quite found interesting, this I think is new, is this one down here. Perfect opportunity. You may spend determination on a task roll. You could do that beforehand, before any dice are rolled. But what you used to do is you used to buy an extra d20 with that, so a third one on the standard, and you would automatically plonk it down on the table with 1. So you would have 1 and you would roll 2 more and you could get several more successes. Now this one is, you basically don't, hang on. Yeah, to select from the dice pool you have in front of you already, you select one of them and put them to the 1. Yeah, so if you don't buy any extra dice pools, you just basically take one of the 2 d20 you get, put it on the 1, and then the other one gets rolled. So it's a reduction in the dice pool size in a way, but it's also a reduction in the risk of getting a complication. So that's definitely changed. That's different. So, here we've got a little bit of lower decks. To be honest, I am struggling a little bit with getting into lower decks. But I like the graphics, and I did like the Strange New Worlds lower deck crossover episode. So people have been telling me once you chew your way through season 1 of lower decks, it actually starts getting more interesting and better. I might have to give it a go. But yeah, I was not charmed. Yeah. Enough said on that. Excuse me. So now we're coming to somewhere where we actually have a proper change. And that's how stress is handled. So we don't have this thing where you have stress, and if you take, for example, 5 stress in one go, you might be injured, and that injury triggers something. That has gone. We also don't have the what are they called? Challenge dice to roll for damage anymore. That has changed. So weapons have a flat damage. And this comes back a little bit now, just on the flow of information in this, and it's Modiphius in general. So I'm having a little rant, and then I'll tell you how this works. But first of all, I need to do something for my throat. Excuse me. So, stress. Stress used to be, stress capacity, fitness plus security. So you might have, like my Andorian security first officer, he's got 5 in security, so he could beef up his fitness level and became actually quite strong by that. Can't do that anymore, it's just fitness. And then you read this, and it says, right, fitness. Fitness for me is physical. Yeah. Stress, as it's explained here, is the ability to withstand stress. It could be mental stress. So why do they just use fitness as an attribute if stress is an abstraction? If it could be any sort of things that can put stress on you, rather than just physical things. It's one of those things about inventing terms again, yeah? Or trying to conceptualize and abstract something that in the end doesn't need to be abstracted here. Because I'll talk to you, unless it's something I'm just not seeing because it's not the full version of the book. But let's have a look here. So it says the following things, yeah? If you can't endure that amount, the stress that you are supposed to suffer, suffer whatever stress you can and suffer a complication. Right, so you have a complication during conflict. Right. If you reach maximum stress, you become fatigued. When fatigued, pick one of your attributes, 6 I think it was, or 7, and you basically you lock that. So while you're fatigued and you tick that particular attribute, which is a bit of bookkeeping, you then say anything that would use that attribute, you automatically fail. All other things are made more difficult by 1 level. So what happens if you suffer more stress after that? Not quite clear. Do you lock another attribute and everything is -2? Don't know yet. But this is definitely different. So when you're defeated, yeah, yes, you can still act on other things. You're not just rolling around on the floor. It's a little bit, reminds me a little bit of things like Dragonbane, which lock an attribute as well. And then you basically get a Bane or rolling with disadvantage on anything you've got on that. But that's not because you are on 0 hit points. That's because you've pushed a roll. So a bit different. Recovering stress used to be if the scene is over, yeah, and people can look after you if you were injured, you're back to full. Now we have here that you have 3 different sort of rests. You've got a breather, a break, a sleep. Short rest, long rest, sleep, maybe. And they will give you back some different levels of stress. Yeah, they will basically reduce your stress. You could argue the other way around. Or you can spend momentum to get some back. That's something that's really familiar to me from Dreams and Machines. Yeah, where you do that with spirit or possibly with momentum as well. So, battlefield. So we have this stress thing. Yeah, it doesn't actually mention combat here. Not really. It just says conflict. And it says it could be lots of other things that give you that. In my mind, I'm thinking this is hit points. Yeah, and it's a flat one line of hit points, and that's it. You don't have these wounds and stuff and injuries you have to deal with, like in Conan, for example. And then it goes to battlefield. Right, zone combat. Nothing has changed here, really, other than your concept. If you want to move through difficult terrain, you used to have to roll a test. And then you could possibly move 1 or 2 zones if you had extra momentum generated from that. But now, basically, if you want to move through a zone now, through something that is difficult, like mud or something, you have to spend momentum to go do that. I find that a bit odd, because momentum used to be like, how do you describe it? Like a party cracker for the players. So you were happy to get momentum, and then you see, oh, what can I do with it? What can I do with it? And you crack it open, and all you get is one of those little, red fish that you put on your palm. Anyway, stretching the metaphor a bit far, but basically, it was something exciting for the players that they could spend on something to look more heroic or whatever. Now it's a cost to move across the battlefield. It just feels different. Feels a bit strange. Right. Cover. Here's an interesting one. So let me zoom in on that. And remember, we haven't talked about combat really yet, because that comes later. So cover is a terrain effect, right? They didn't say trait here, but okay. They probably should. A zone will either provide cover to any creature in the zone, or you can basically say this one cover and that one is cover. How it's handled is here, it's hidden a little bit. Cover allows you to turn an enemy ranged attack into an opposed task. Now, if you know opposed tasks, basically you roll, opponent rolls, you compare them somehow, and there's a reason why I'm saying somehow, and whoever gets the better result wins. So I attack. I shoot somebody at the other side of the room. Now they're ducking behind some of those Ferengi packing crates. And because they have some cover, I now roll my results, and they roll theirs, and we compare. And if they have more successes, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute, if they are more successful than I am, then they can spend momentum to actually hurt me. Yeah? So that's takes a little bit of thinking about, because it's very different from previously, but I think I quite like this. Because you get these pitched battles where everybody just does pop shots. And that means if you attack somebody, you run a risk of being counter-struck. So it could actually speed up the fighting as well. On the opposed task, here's another change. It used to be you roll, the other person rolls, whoever gets more momentum, depending on their own role and their own difficulty, whoever gets more momentum wins. Now it's different. The defender rolls first. Whatever successes they get sets the difficulty for the attacker. In a way, that's a cleaner solution, because you don't have to count momentum and stuff. It's also something that I know from Dreams and Machines. But I really want to see how that plays out, because there's a very split commentary from the people I've spoken to about this so far. Some people say they love it. Some people say, nah, that's daft. It was better the other way. But I want to see it in action before I really say. Right, combat actions. I don't think this has changed much. You can take one minor action and 1 major action, and that's it. And minor action could be movement. Yeah? Don't think this has changed. If it has, let me know. So, major actions, first aid has changed a little bit. If you wanted to revive a defeated character that used to be difficulty 1, now it's difficulty 2. So it's a bit harder. If you pass, the character is no longer defeated. Basically, they don't have the penalty anymore, but if they had an injury, they might still have it. But they're able to act again. And then it says you may tend to an injury on another character within reach. You attempt this with a different roll, or same roll actually, but the difficulty depends on how, potent the energy, the injury is. So basically what trait that has got. So if it's burn 5, then you have a difficulty of 5 to treat it. Very hard to do, unless you're maybe in a med kit, med lab. I can see that sort of works for me, but I would like to see that actually play out. How often does it happen now that people go down? Because I have a feeling it will happen less often. Just because if this rule of taking 5 hits at once, 5 injury stress, whatever you want to call it at once, giving you an injury automatically, that is gone. Right. So, making an attack, that has not changed, I don't think at all, other than this counter-attack thing here. So, if the attack was an opposed task, I explained that already, and the defender wins that comparison, the target won, then they may either move out of reach or spend 2 momentum to counter-attack, inflicting injury upon you in return. I know that from Dragonbane, I think. Dragonbane in Melee, that can happen. But also, it can happen in Dreams and Machines again. So, definitely you can see some commonalities in the more recent 2D20 games. I don't know how Dune does this. I haven't actually tackled my Dune book over there. But you can see that there's a shared DNA between them, basically. And now this is editors. Come on, I'm sure you can do better than this. This one is really confusing to read. So if you read it 3 times, and maybe you want to start at the back and read backwards. Not every word, just like paragraph by paragraph. So let's have a look at this. When you hit an opponent, they become injured. Fact. Some injuries can come from environmental effects. When a character is hit by an attack or affected by a hazard, they suffer an injury. So, slight contradiction. Sorry, this is my proofreading coming through. They may become injured, and here it's now an indicative, not a possibility. They suffer an injury. So you've suffered an injury. So I shot at you, I was successful, you suffer an injury. Right. That's it. You're dead. Well, possibly. But wait, isn't there something else you can do? Of course there is. It says, now it goes into its explanation. An injury is a trait, it's got a name and can do this and it can do that, and you can treat it as that. Right. All sources of injury have a severity. That's basically the flat damage rating. The number, normally between 1 and 5, indicates how severe the injury is. We talked about that when we talked about the healing. When you succeed at an attack, you can spend 2 momentum to increase the severity twice. Yeah, you can raise the damage. Okay, all good. When a character suffers an injury, they are also defeated. Oh dear. So they've got defeated. We said if you're defeated, you log one of those attributes, and everything else becomes harder by 1. And it also said if you're running out of stress and you take more stress than you can take, that you suffer another complication. Does that still apply? I don't think it does, because I think the complication is the injury. But again, let me know what you think. So far, so good. You get hit, you are injured, you are down, you're defeated, that's it. Don't get hit. But, again, we talk about stunning, yeah, fine, deadly attacks, and how to die. But then, half a page on, we get avoiding injury. When you suffer an injury, you may avoid injury by taking stress. Okay. When you suffer an injury, you may suffer stress equal to the attack severity to ignore that injury. All right. So I have to spend stress to not get injured? Isn't that a bit like, I know it's not quite the same, but isn't that a bit like a hit point bar? I think it is. So essentially, for me, stress are like hit points. You've got a capacity. Now, it does say suffer stress, whether you count up or down. It's neither here nor there. The bar is the same length. And that basically now says you have ducked out of the way at the last moment or otherwise evaded or resisted the attack. So this whole truth at the beginning, truth not in the Dreams and Machines meaning, but normal meaning, saying as an indicative statement, if you get hit, you suffer an injury, wasn't actually true. It's contradicted here now, clearly contradicted. But they should be together, those things. Or actually the other way around. Yeah, when you get hit, you will have the chance to avoid an injury. But if you can't because you don't have enough stress, then you take it. That's how I would have structured. Anyway, this then basically says, if you avoid it by having enough stress to spend, then you also avoid the injury. Makes sense, but yeah, the sequence doesn't really. Or maybe it's my scrambled brain, I don't know. So recovery and healing, as I said, it takes longer. Yeah. To actually heal stress back up. Suffice it to say that. I don't want to repeat everything. Combat momentum spends are very, very similar. What you have a bit different here is this alter trait. It's basically the same as on the other one, but this is the combat momentum spends. So it's repeated, and I can sort of see why you would repeat it, because people in a combat situation will look for this table, not for the other one, not the general momentum spends. So, weapons. We used to have qualities that a weapon could, for instance, cause certain effects with the effects dice. That's gone. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. So, for example, if you've performed a prepare minor action before attacking, you may add one of the following qualities to the attack: area, intense, or piercing. That's with a charge weapon. So, okay, let's have a look at area. When you succeed at an attack, additional targets in the same zone may be hit by spending 1 momentum. So the effect symbols you use to roll on the die essentially need to have a replacement. You need to have a way of feeding and fueling those effects. And I think basically what they're doing here is they're saying, yeah, you use momentum for that. So momentum will probably flow more freely both ways, threat and momentum, to make these things happen. So I can see that currency being used more than previously, because you cannot just rely on effects. Right, so that brings me pretty much to the end, other than having a look at the character sheets. Because the character sheet says 1,000 words, as they say, or something like that. So we have the ship. Here's the USS Challenger, which I put over there next to the screen as well. So, looks interesting. A little bit of extra here on the cell on this side, and then the cell on the other side. These blue lights are a little bit prettier. But basically, the one thing that I noticed when I was looking through this, there's no power rating. Shield, there's a lot of shield here. Shield 14 seems a lot to me. But there's no power rating. Okay. Either they didn't feel it necessary because the included adventure doesn't need it, or they found a different solution to manage power. Don't know. I just cannot tell. It's one of those known unknowns. Let's have a look at the Commodore here. Yeah, Commodore. Very, very chilled and relaxed. I need a captain's chair like this for my study here. We still have attributes and, not disciplines, but departments. So this very much looks like what we had before. The stress is always the same as the fitness now. Yeah? Stress is the same as fitness. So that's a bit easier. We have the weapons here, our phaser type 2, for example, ranged. Yeah, of course. Stun deadly, 4. That's the way, that's the effects or traits attached to it, or whatever you want to call them. Qualities, really. 4 is the damage, flat damage, not dice roll anymore. Size 1 hand, extra thing you can do with it is charge, as we just looked at. Very similar, very similar. Let's have a look at the talents here. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So we used to have 4 talents for characters. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 4, like we used to have, plus a species ability. And the species ability, essentially, you can only have for you. We use species. There might be more than one. Don't know. Can't tell. But that gives you the 5th one. There were species abilities before, but you basically had to spend one of your talent choices on it. You don't have to do that anymore. So, What are they? When Xen succeeds at a task where she purchased one or more d20s with momentum, she generates a bonus momentum for each d20 purchased. Okay, I can see that. That's quite good. Dauntless. Whenever another character attempts to intimidate or threaten Xen, she may take 2 stress to ignore their attempt. Aha. So stress can be spent like this to avoid effects. So that's what stress was trying to hint at. I think this whole generic abstracted concept of stress says, yeah, you can use it for different things. For example, if somebody is trying to intimidate you, you get some mental stress. But if that is so, why just link it to fitness? Yeah? It's me. Simplification, I guess. Reassuring, for example, is another one. You can spend momentum to reassure her allies. Yeah, when you use presence. So again, the momentum spends and stress spends are powering these talents. And that's, yeah, to an extent. But I think it's much more of that flow of threat and momentum going back and forth. I think they're trying to feed that. And the veteran one is quite nice as well. So you roll a d20 against control rating, then you can get a determination back. So I won't go through them all. That would be too boring. But you see how the characters work? Maybe we just have a look at here, the Vulcan. Yeah, we've got Dr. Voral, mental discipline, species, talent, ability, whatever you want to call it. They're not quite consistent here. So Voral's maximum stress is based on control. So not on fitness. That I find interesting. Excuse me. So it doesn't have to be just fitness. There seems to be a way of modifying this, and I like that. I like that because that basically feeds what I was saying earlier. She can take stress to avoid suffering any trait representing an emotional state. Good stuff. So she takes stress, but says, I am not being emotional. I am Vulcan. I know how to deal with this. Yeah? But yeah, this is almost a bit like, it reminds me a little bit of Simbarum, where you can basically take some talents to say, I don't attack with my quick stat, I attack with my strength stat, can't remember what it's called, but I'm using a different one, yeah, or I want to shoot my bow with my intelligence stat. There were talents that would basically shift things around, so this is a little bit like that, to say your stress is not based on your fitness, but on your control. Makes sense for Vulcan, but I like that, so there might be much more to come on this. Yeah, like this one as well, other fans will be divided on this one. Species talents for humans. Faith of the heart. Some slightly awful theme music noodling in my head when I read that. I think you know what I mean. So then we've got dedicated focus. So we don't just have a focus on something, but we have a dedicated focus. Yeah, and then you can, as it says, scores a critical success for any die which rolls equal to or under twice the relevant department. So what I was explaining right at the beginning, and you know this if you know the game, if you have a focus that applies, so let's see how focuses are agriculture, botany, and so on. Usually you would roll, so let's say as a which one makes sense? Reason, medicine roll she's trying to do. So 11 plus 3 is 14. You roll 2d20. You count anything as a 14 as a success. Now you, however, say, you know what? The focus applies. Anything that's 3 or under counts as 2 successes. If her dedicated focus applies, everything 3 or under would now be, sorry, botany? Yes, medicine. Yeah, could be medicine or science here. Anything 3 or under would now be, not 2 successes, but did I count that right? 4 successes? Yeah. So if, sorry, not, yeah, that's right. Twice the relevant department. No, sorry, it's the other way around. Sorry, rewind. So anything 6 or under would now be counting as 2 successes. That's how it works. Sorry. Yeah, just got my knickers in a twist there. So, characters. Great. So the art, as I said, I like the art. I think they're definitely trying to simplify the system. I'll be very interested to see how they cope with the scientific method and extended tasks in this. we actually have started using extended tasks. Once you get your head around them, they are not so bad. And if you have a bit of time pressure and so on, you need time pressure, then actually they play really nicely. But you needed effect dice for those. So let's see how that works here. Whether they just basically say you have to spend momentum to work down the stress track of your extended tasks to get effects and breakthroughs and stuff. Don't know. But I'm just hoping that the overall clarity, the overall simplification will carry through. And I do hope that the editing of the core rulebook will still improve a little bit. Like what I was saying about the sequence of the different paragraphs here. Don't know. We'll see. I'll definitely be checking this game out when I go up to the UK Games Expo, because I think they might have it there. There's certainly running games there. I'm running 5 games, so I'm not sure I'm going to have a chance to play anything. But yeah, I'll definitely have a talk with the guys and find out what they're saying. But I could see this being quite nice as an update. What they have said is that it should be fully backwards compatible with pretty much all that great content they have provided already, because there's a lot of stuff out for Star Trek Adventures. I think the jury's still out on that, because a lot of the descriptions of NPCs in particular have got, and weapons and damage and so on, always have this combat dice. Oh, sorry, wrong game. That's Conan. Challenge dice as rolling damage. A lot of the talents rely on those dice. So if they're going to be gone and you're trying to play without those dice, but you're trying to reinterpret games on the go, I think they will need to provide some conversion guidelines. Yeah, otherwise it's not obvious to me how you would address that. And yes, there's always rulings instead of rules. But yeah, I think they will need to offer some sort of assistance there. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. If you did, leave me a like. If you like this sort of content, leave me a comment, leave me a sub. Yeah, streamers basically just live for the knowledge that somebody out there is watching it. Yeah, my YouTube channel is monetized now, and I can proudly reveal that in my first, if that's not a commercial secret, my first full month of all those extra ad revenues that I'm getting, all those streams, I got about £10. Great. Anyway, not complaining. £10 is better than a kick in the teeth. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Leave me a comment. What do you think about this system? Do you think this is a move in the right direction? Do you think this is going in the wrong direction? Do you think this is getting rid of something you really love about Star Trek Adventures? Leave us a comment. Would be interested to read them. Anyway, for now, I'm just going to say ta-ta and see you next time.